I know you know this, but I'm in Scotland this week, just for another 48 hours or so. I know, the retreat in Scotland. When I start the retreat, I always think, I've got all this time. And then before you know it, I'm waving goodbye to the Black Isle, and I'm on the way back home. But I've had a wonderful time, and so have our guests. We've all enjoyed ourselves immensely, and there will be some specials, and that's my reason for popping up now, actually, at the start of this show in a slightly different fashion to usual. Now, next week is going to be the first of two specials. This might be the other way around, but I suspect it'll be this way. We did something this year on the Scottish Photowalk retreat that we've never done before. We embrace the world of film photography and printing, or we have been doing that for 5 years now. How many years have we been coming? I discussed this with Lynn. But anyway, we've been doing it for a number of years now, going into the Inverness darkroom and using the wonderful facilities and the teachings of Matt Sillers, and we have a wonderful time doing that. But we changed it up a bit this year because we were in Inverness in Scotland just for 1 week this year. It was a slightly more intimate workshop, really. The three of Giles and Michael and John, myself and Lynn, so 5 of us in all, and so slightly more intimate class this year, or workshop, and we thought, what should we do? We'll do something very different. Lynn said, why don't we try photogravure? Something I've not done before, an age-old process. When it comes to, so is darkroom as well, I know, and printing, but this particular process, a beautiful process, handcrafting process of pressing ink onto paper, and it's become its own special. So next week, the photogravure special. Then the week after, it's the Scottish Photowalk retreat. It'll follow the fun that we had on the workshop, the places we went, the things that we saw, and the discussions that we had. And we had a few, as you'll hear. So that'll be the next 2 weeks. This week, though, as I suppose really serving up a starter for what's to come, there's a shorter show as I'm away. And whenever I go away, there's usually a few specials while I'm away. And this week is no different. We've got an interview special featuring 2 photographers with real Scottish heritage. The first of those is going to be Albert Watson. I'll introduce the second of those to you shortly after you've heard Albert. Now, Albert Watson doesn't live in Scotland anymore. He has Scottish heritage. He now lives in the United States. But few photographers can claim to have shaped the visual culture of the last 5 decades quite like Albert. From iconic portraits of actors, which we'll talk about, musicians and world leaders, to fashion campaigns and fine art projects, his photographs have become a part of the visual language of our time. Born in Scotland and based now in New York for much of his career, he's created some of the most recognisable images ever published. There's a fair chance that you might think, I didn't know Albert did that one, as you look through his portfolio. Yet behind the fame and this extraordinary body of work, I found a photographer whose curiosity and work ethic and his desire to share and be generous with that, I found that really warming, as you're about to hear, I hope. So it's a chance to listen again to one of my conversations a good few years back now with the legendary Albert Watson.
Albert, photography's gain is mathematics lost, because it seemed like you were destined to do something with your incredible mathematic muscle, such that you'd flexed working in the air ministry in your first job prior to uni, which was calculating the path of missiles had they ever been fired toward Russia. Not the start of a story many people might expect. So it's maths or something creative, but you certainly wanted to learn, didn't you?
Yeah, I was determined to go back to university.
Yeah.
When I say back to university, go to university, because I left school, went to London for 1 year, then a chocolate factory for a year. But I was determined to go back to university. I was determined. And I took mathematics classes at night school. And I also had 2 days a week going to art classes. So at the end of the year, I missed the application to Edinburgh Art College. So I applied to Dundee, and I got into Dundee, which is the Duncan of Jordanston College of Art up in Dundee, which is part of St Andrews University.
And this is where you started to study graphic design, wasn't it?
That's correct. I had 2 years general art.
Yeah.
And what they do is you do pottery, you do drawing, painting, a lot of drawing and painting, because they felt that was a basis of a lot of art. And you had a history of art, silversmithing, graphic design, textile design, and you could specialize. There were different schools within the college.
Yeah.
I love graphic design, I still do. I went into graphic design school, and I took the craft subject, which was the first year ever they did it, was photography. By this time, it was 1964 to 66 that I studied and specialized in graphic design, and the craft subject was photography.
Now, I know the graphic design is very important. I'm going to fast forward slightly. 1966, you've got an IBM scholarship. You just found your way into the Royal College of Art Film School. There's a lot of film and graphics influence in your work, isn't there?
That's who and what I do. But I greatly value the education that I got at that time in Dundee. And it was a disciplined education. It even had its roots in almost Victorian teaching of the way they would teach.
So with this deep knowledge now of graphic design, your next move is to America. And I know that it was your wife that had a teaching job in America that facilitated that move. Was it a bit of a leap of faith, though?
I had gone to America in the summer of 66.
Yeah.
I went to New York, Aspen, Colorado for a design conference.
Yeah.
Then LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Washington, DC. And then back up to New York and then back home. And that took 3.5 weeks, nearly 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And it had a big impression on me, places like LA and San Francisco and so on.
Yeah.
And I was very keen after the Royal College to go back there. And I persuaded my wife to apply for a teaching job, which she got. And I went in as her dependent. Thank God for my wife, So we ended up in LA because I had put in with her the application of maybe New Orleans. And then they said New Orleans for British people is very hard because of the heat and the humidity. And whereas LA has a better weather pattern. So in we went, and we just simply stayed, there. That was that was 1970. We arrived on August the 28th, 1970.
I love I don't know whether this was the first job, but I'd like to believe it was. I think it was the first big one. Starting afresh in a new country, you went to see the head of Max Factor, but you went to see the head of Max Factor without any beauty shots.
That is correct.
You didn't have any.
He said, the guy said, I love your pictures. He said, but you don't have any beauty shots. And I basically said, they're on a boat coming soon. And that's when he turned around and said, look, I'll tell you what I'll do for you. I've got a closet here with clothes from various shootings, and I'll book a model for an hour for you. And he said, let me see what you can do. So I went to a model agency, picked a model. I picked some dresses, and I then met the model, and I said to her, how about if we spend the day photographing, not an hour, but the day photographing, and I'll give you some outtakes for your portfolio. And she said, sure. And she also said, I've got a friend of mine who's a male model. Would you be interested in him coming too? And we could photograph together and so on, etc. We started at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I shot a solid 12.5 hours. I put every penny I had into the film, and I was very conservative with the film as I shot, and I didn't have any assistants.
Do you remember what you were shooting with?
I had a Hasselblad with two lenses, an 80 millimeter and a 150, and I shot 60 rolls of film. And I took all the film in, and there was a kind of an art department there, and I put them all on a light box, a huge light box they had. And when the guy came in, the first thing he said was, "You shot this in an hour?" And I was like, "No, not quite." I said, I booked her for an hour, so you only have to pay for her for an hour. But I talked her into staying all day. Now, I think that impressed him as much as anything, in a way, that I had talked the model into staying, to do the picture. So anyway, he took a long time looking at the pictures, and I was just standing. He didn't say much. And he grabbed like 4 or 5 rolls of film, different shots. And he said, "I'll be right back." Well, he was away for quite a long time. It must have been about 20, 25 minutes. I was just sitting there waiting. And he came back and he said, "I have some good news for you." He said, "We're going to buy 5 of these shots." And I thought, wow, that's great. And he said, "I've got a couple of shootings coming up that I think we can, basically do business with you, sort of thing. And he said, "Let me give you a PO." And of course, at that time, I had no idea what a PO was, a purchase order. So he put it in an envelope, and I went, and he said, "But we can do a meeting next week." And he said, "I'll let you know about other stuff going on." So, of course, I was very happy, very ecstatic. And I got into the elevator and kind of ripped open the envelope. I looked at it quickly, and it looked to me like it was $150 for 5 shots. You have to remember, this is 1971.
Yeah.
That was a good chunk of money for a day, $750. I mean, the photographers today working for $750, they'll be happy to get $750. So anyway, I got home, and I told Liz, my wife, it was very exciting. And they said, "It's great." And I said, "We're going to do a bill." So she borrowed a typewriter from the school she was at, and she was typing it out, and she said, "Well, it looks like it's not $150, but it looks like it's $1,500. And I was like, "No, it can't be $1,500 because now that's $7,500. And I thought, that's impossible. So then, of course, the big discussion was all that weekend was whether or not we should try our luck and bill for $7,500, and then we thought it could be some form of embezzlement or against the law or something, or they might deport us or some scandal or something.
Yeah.
So the next thing was, I said, I have a meeting on Tuesday with the guy. So we didn't bill, and I spoke to him. I said, "I just wanted to speak to you about the money." And we clarified it. It said $7,500 all we had in the budget at the moment, but I could probably get you a bit more the next time. So of course I was like, no, that's fine, sort of thing, And then I always remember at the very bottom of the piece of paper, I should have kept it at the PO, and at the bottom it said plus all expenses. Meaning the film and and it listed lunch or anything like that. I mean, I'd bought the people a sandwich. That was it, sort of thing. And that was really the start.
A Scotsman in America, was that at that time equally quite a nice point of difference for you as well, Albert? A bit of a USP?
Oh, I think it was. I mean, I think they found me amusing. I had quite long hair at that time. I looked a bit like a hippie. I always remember with doing a shooting for Max Factor, and I remember telling 3 American models on a hill what I wanted them to do, to run down the hill, and they had these flowing dresses on. And I said to them, "I just want you to run down, interact with each other, throw your heads back, move your head, so the hair's moving, like a high energy beauty shot sort of thing." And so I went on and explained in great detail, when you come down halfway, stop and then start again, and then come down a little bit more, stop and start again. So I kept telling them all this information, and I turned around to walk down the hill. And then one model said to the other model, "What did he say?" And another model said, "I don't know, but just laugh." Just laugh. I just run down the hill and laugh. So when I first got there, nobody could understand what I was saying because my accent was very heavy. Of course, over the years, it changed and mellowed and took on a slight American, with the Scottish sort of thing.
But as this was going along, you were having to really invent yourself from day one, weren't you? You were Max Factor, the first big client, then you're doing more fashion work. How were you handling this?
I began to do basically every single job I could get my hands on.
Right.
And I would call people, and I remember seeing a hospital appliance catalog that was terribly photographed, that was very badly done. And I remember calling this company and asking to speak to the catalog production person. And I got through to them and I said, can I show you my portfolio? You know, and of course I had maybe 2 still life things in the portfolio. And I went to see this guy and he gave me this huge catalog of hospital appliances, including a whole section on bedpans. And back then, which sounds now incredible, it had to be shot to size. So that involved me going out and renting an 8x10 camera. And the size of the objects was a straight copy to the size in the catalog. I know it sounds incredible, but it meant if a bedpan, for example, was 3 inches high in the catalog, then I had to shoot it on the camera, measure it on the camera at 3 inches. And the catalog was 8x10. And then they give you a strict layout of doing it. So it's not easy. And then, as any photographer will tell you, photographing an object like a bedpan, which is chromed, like an electric kettle is chromed or a pot. Yeah. It's not the easiest thing in the world to photograph, you know, in light, because I didn't have a lot of experience in that. And of course, I ended up like, it was a nightmare, the job, really. And by that time, I was getting more and more jobs and I was busy and I was doing locations, I was doing swimsuits and I was doing insurance ads. And then the next thing was Datsun. They called me. And then the next thing was I was a car photographer photographing trucks. I shot every single thing you could imagine.
You don't imagine those famous Albert Watson bedpan pictures are still out there, do you, somewhere?
I think they were for a while, but I think in case anybody found them after I'm dead and buried, that they found the bedpan shootings.
The famous Albert Watson bedpan shots. Your work is very varied, though. I mean, let's talk technically now, as well as creatively, from stark democratic white backgrounds to more complex outdoor location shoots. I know you believe in the importance of a team and assistants and makeup and editors. What's your philosophy on set when it comes to things like lighting, though? Do you like to control everything, or do you trust the people around you to do that for you?
No, I'm afraid I absolutely. As far as lighting is concerned, I'm 100% control freak.
Right.
I have to say, you might say I'm guilty of that. I would never rely on anybody else to do that. I would much prefer to solve it myself. And, you work with good assistants who know basic structure of putting something together and what's necessary. But since I'm changing all the time, it's very hard for them to do. It's not like if the shooting starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm never turning up at 9:30, 10 o'clock.
No.
I mean, I'm there at 8 o'clock in the morning with everybody else when they're setting up,
You're incredibly well known and respected for your stylized portrait work with celebrities, shots that are simply household trademarks almost of those you photograph. The wonderful picture of Keith Richards, veiled by his famous tobacco, that picture of Alfred Hitchcock with a goose, which we'll talk about, Aretha Franklin, Malcolm X, B.B. King's wonderful dramatic pout, and then Jagger in that cat shot, which we'll talk about as well. But when did the celebrity work really start to take off for you?
I think it was 1973, 74, and we got a call from Harper's Bazaar. We were still in LA, and there was a call from New York, from the art director of Harper's Bazaar magazine. They had heard from a couple of people that I was an interesting photographer, I guess, whatever they said about me.
Yeah.
They said, we'd like you to photograph somebody famous. We can't tell you until tomorrow. I said, okay. And of course, I was very excited that a New York magazine was calling me. So it hadn't happened before, really. And then they called back and they said, we'd like you to photograph Alfred Hitchcock. And of course, I was like, wow, okay. And then they said, he's a gourmet chef. He's going to give us, for the Christmas issue, a recipe for goose. Of course, it was a good headline. Alfred Hitchcock cooks his own goose. And they said, we'd like him holding a plate with a cooked goose on it. And I said, okay, that's not a problem. I kind of thought about it. And an hour later, I called them back. And I said, the one thing that it's a cooked goose has got to be about 25, 30 pounds. I said to kind of hold that on a silver platter might be a difficult shot for him. Not for me, I guess, but yes, difficult for me too. And it would necessitate a table. I was a bit worried that he looked like a maitre d' because he always had a bow tie.
Yeah.
And I thought he might look like a maitre d' bringing it to your table, which may or may not be a good thing. And they said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I thought I could just get a plucked goose, like he was going to cook it, not he'd cooked it. And I can put some Christmas decorations around the neck to give it a little bit of Christmas.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, let's get back to you. They got back to me and they said, yeah, we love that. And I said, I can make it look like he throttled the goose.
Which is very Hitchcock.
Which is more Hitchcock.
Yeah.
That was really, the shot was enormously successful.
I mean, it's become a shot that's synonymous with you.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, and sometimes people ask me, what's your favorite shot? I would say, well, that's one of them. Not because I think it's the best shot. I think there's a lot more complicated, more difficult shots that I've done that involved a lot more planning, thought, work, and so on. But, I liked it because I pulled it off.
Yeah.
I remember being nervous, that's for sure.
You were nervous?
Of course, yes. Yeah. I wasn't, people say, well, you must have been confident. I was not confident. I was nervous. And also I was lucky it was Hitchcock because he helped.
So you kind of co-directed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he said, what do you want me to do? And of course, I didn't tell him about the plate or anything like that. Yeah. And I said, I just want you to hold this. And of course, he was very funny when he first held, he was holding the goose like this, And I said to him, maybe you can have a look at the goose. And he said, of course, So he turned his head, then he turned the goose's head towards him. And he said, would you like the goose to remain eye contact? He said. So he was fabulous.
Yeah.
And he knew I was nervous, but he helped me. And then at the end of it, he said, you look like you could do with a nice cup of tea. And then the next thing was that I was in his office having shortbread biscuits with Hitchcock. So it was a bit shocking,
Perfect. I mean, there are a few shots like that are synonymous with you. The nude Kate Moss shots. You didn't know who she was, but I mean, that's become an exceptionally iconic shot, not just for you, but for her.
I knew she was up and coming. She was beginning to create a stir in the business. So, and I said, okay, we just spend one day photographing with her. And then I met her the night she arrived. And I met her, I liked her. And she was quite positive about working. She had another person that had that was Monica Bellucci. Monica Bellucci had the same thing. And she had that intensity. And Kate had a bit of that, And I said, I have good news and bad news about tomorrow. And I said, what do you want first, the good news or the bad news? And she said, well, give me the bad news. I said, it's only you tomorrow, nobody else. And she said, oh, that's not bad news. And she said, well, what's the good news? I said, the good news is it's only you tomorrow. In other words, the good news and the bad news is the same, because sometimes you get models that come in and they're so happy that it's just them, that they're the number one. It's all about them. So anyway, we started working with Kate in the morning at 7 o'clock. And I worked with her until 9:30 at night.
Wow.
She worked 14 hours.
Wow.
And that nude shot that I did of her, I said, I want you to forget that you're nude and just imagine that you're more like an elf or a fairy in the woods or something spiritual.
Yeah.
And I said that you're looking for somebody, And at that time, I was really beginning to shift really strongly away from beauty shots and into what I call beauty portraits. So I had begun to work on much more emotions and try to switch from beauty shots to portraiture, where I could try and squeeze something out of the model. And of course, I got photographing a lot of actors and I was trying to incorporate some of that into the fashion beauty that I did.
Well, the portraits, from where do you get these ideas? They're fantastical. Jack Nicholson is one of my favourites, those many reflections. Mick Jagger, I can see, I have the good fortune to see into your office, and I can see behind you that wonderful Jagger picture. The big Jagger as a big cat, and Bowie's head in a box. These are so creative.
Well, I mean, you have to go back to the idea of graphic design. And part of the thing in graphic design at that time was, what's your idea for this book jacket, for this album cover, for this poster for a circus? What's your idea? I love the idea when they forced me to think of something. I mean, I did for a play that was on called Toys in the Attic. That was a well-known play. And we used to do posters for the repertory company in Dundee Rep. And I remember doing this. I thought about toys. How can I make this? It was a psychological drama. And how can this idea of toys in the attic and something strange. And then I remember photographing the daughter of one of the lecturers there. A very simple shot of a child. And then I remember taking children's wooden blocks, building blocks.
Yeah.
And I took 6 of them. I then divided the photo into 6 and put them as building blocks. And then I realized that in a surreal way, I could put the building blocks in any configuration. So therefore, the building blocks represented toys. And for the surreal aspect, I could split up the face.
Yeah.
And just separate it slightly. And there was endless combinations there. So this was a way that I could suggest the surreal and suggest something apart from that. And graphically, it worked out beautifully. And just simple type, Toys in the Attic. And the blocks made a statement of toys, and the child was smiling. So, of course, by the time you split it up a little bit, the smile became something not, the picture was very cute of her, just a little smiling snapshot. But when you applied it to building bricks and cut it and separated it, it became interesting.
But is this kind of detail, the coming together of idea, concept, creativity, visualization, is such a hallmark of your work, Albert. And then as mentioned, there's this Mick Jagger shot where his face, pre-Photoshop I might add, morphs in the still image into a big cat, or possibly the other way around, a supremely creative picture. Where on earth did that idea spring from?
That kind of came spontaneously, some of it came spontaneously. A lot of times I was planning. The Mick Jagger shot was not planned. Was it not? Happened. Oh. No, it was not planned, because we'd planned to shoot Jagger in the front of a Corvette with the Leopard. And it turned out the Leopard was just simply too dangerous, I knew that. I'd photographed a lot of cats. And, a cheetah is easy to manage, but a leopard has this speed and just suddenly can just instinctively become dangerous.
Yeah.
And Jagger knew this as well. He said, they're dangerous, these animals. So when we put the two of them in the car together, nowadays with Photoshop, think about it today with Photoshop, you shoot a leopard, you shoot Jagger, splice them together, done, Of course, I wanted some kind of interaction. Now he could have faked it, and the leopard could be doing different things. I just never thought of assembling it. I wanted to get it in one shot.
Yeah.
And so then what I decided to do was to build a plexiglass. We had a piece of plexiglass. So there was a fence barrier. And then I always knew that it was a double page, left and a right-hand horizontal shot. And I knew that I could deliver it to them. I could just simply cut out the piece of plexi and stick it together and give it to the magazine spliced. So, of course, at that point, you say, well, why didn't you just shoot the leopard and shoot Jagger? And then you would have spliced it the same way. You could have just cut it and spliced it, because the splice would go into the gutter. You wouldn't see it. I never thought of that. It was the weird thing was I wanted one shot. And in fact, that shot turned out to be later when it surfaced. Lots of people started to buy it from galleries and things like that. Yeah. because Jagger's looking a little bit nervous, and the leopard's there kind of looking suspicious. However, when they were building that partition, I said, let me do, just to make up time, let me do a portrait of Jagger. I'll do a portrait of the leopard, but I'll shoot it on the same roll of film. So it's a double exposure. Once again, the kind of thing now, you can just source a shot of a leopard, take a picture of Jagger.
Absolutely.
And you can just Photoshop them together. Everybody, any young person looking at that just assumes that's how that was done.
Yeah.
But in fact, it was done on one piece of film, you know.
Yeah.
I just rewound. I never thought it would work. I photographed the leopard first, and I drew where the leopard was, the eyes and the nose on the viewfinder with a China marker.
Oh, my word. Is that how it was done?
And then I fitted his eyes into the leopard's eyes, so they were the same size.
Good heavens. I didn't realize it was done like that. That's so ingenious.
To be quite honest, I was just making up stuff at that time, because the main shot I was interested in, you know. And then there was a huge fight after that, because I had to send it to Jagger, you know, and in those days you didn't send it on a phone or anything like that. We had to send him a Xerox fax machine thing, you know. And he saw it, he said, oh, it looks great, no problem. And then later that night, he was in LA. The next thing was, when I got in the next morning, there were 3 calls from Jagger on the phone, on my answering machine, saying, don't give it to Rolling Stone, I want to use it myself. And of course, by this time, I'd already given it to Rolling Stone. Of course, then there was a big fight. And he kept saying to Rolling Stone, why don't you use the other shot? And Jan Venner at Rolling Stone says, I haven't even seen the other shot. This is the one I want, you know, something.
There's a wonderful, I'm going to call it an Albert Wattsian quote. Your driving force should be 5% kit, 95% what you're going to do. Of course, digital, Albert, has brought about a fascination for more and more resolution, bigger and better ways to practically shoot in the dark, high ISO, and so on and so forth. Do you think that somehow masked the 5% that you talk about? That's the most important bit.
You know, there are some weird things about the digital revolution. I spent 40 years in a darkroom printing, because I love printing. It didn't matter if it was silver, platinum, palladium, cyanotypes, any other process I could get my hands on and practice in the darkroom, you know. And after 40 odd years in the darkroom, when I got onto a computer screen, it was amazing how much that those 40 years played when you're on a cold computer screen. I became fascinated with Photoshop, and there were aspects of it that I thought were just awful, terrible, and cheap looking. But there were other aspects where I thought, my goodness, I can really use this in a way. And I spoke, if you know the photographer Sarah Moon, and I remember chatting with her, and I said, how do you feel about Photoshop? She says, oh my God, she said, I love it to pieces, she said, you know. And I said, you're like me? I said, I absolutely love it. And she said, of course, it's full of junk, you know, kind of junk stuff, you know, special effects. And once you go near that, it's deadly. But once you hold on to your analog training and you go into digital, then and into Photoshop, that's the best thing for me. I remember doing a landscape project in the Orkney Islands, the standing stones in the Orkney Islands.
Oh, yeah.
And with an 8x10 camera. And it was a nightmare. It was really a nightmare. The one thing that I hadn't fully appreciated, talk about planning, and I knew about it, but I thought I would be okay, was the wind. There's actually a shot of the camera where there are 6 huge sandbags on the camera, and you would look at the camera, and the camera in the wind was still, with all the sandbags on it, the camera itself was
still going. Right.
Was trembling. And of course, with those cameras, you want to shoot at f/22 or f/16 at least, and you look it up, and the next thing was you're shooting at a 15th of a second, you know. And it was problematic in the wind. The wind was a problem, not the camera. And I ended up building a tent around it. So every time you to do it, it was a nightmare. So when I did years later, I did the project on sky, which I was there for 6 weeks photographing sky. I was able to use a phase one. At that time, it was 100 megapixels, and you could actually shoot several frames. So you could actually create images that were 300 and 400 megapixels, if you wanted, or even more if you wanted, and assemble them in a computer. And I just found them easier to manage.
There's tremendous opportunity in photography now, Albert, and I know you spend a lot of time talking with new upcoming photographers. You have the online course. Your latest book is Albert Watson, Creating Photographs, which unveils even more stories behind the famous shots. But what's the state of the industry now, specifically fashion and portraits? I mean, you arrived at that Max Factor meeting and talked your way in. But what are the opportunities now for those who want to follow a similar footpath?
I think it's very hard for them. I think, it's particularly hard, I think, for the fashion. If you want to be a fashion photographer these days, I think it's very, very tough. It's very hard. And I think a lot of what's kind of fashionable right now is stuff that looks very much like, it was taken on an iPhone. And you even have some photographers, older photographers, that will do a project on an iPhone, to make it more trendy or more simple or whatever. And I think it's very difficult. The fashion business right now is in turmoil. Fashion doesn't change. And which I pointed out that, say, the 50s, 60s, and 70s to a great extent was a time of music and fashion. That was an explosive time. I'm not saying that music and fashion died in 1975, but it was on its way down. And when you look at current, fashion's not so important to your average teenager or 20-year-old. It's less important. And the proof of that is stand outside a high school. And if you go back 10 years, you'll see the kids coming out wearing a hoodie. And guess what they're wearing when they come out of a school today? They're still wearing hoodies and jeans and a T-shirt. It doesn't change. Now, there's one or two pockets of change. But essentially, that idea of street fashion influenced a lot of designers. So the next thing is you would see heavyweight French designers with a hoodie and and jeans and a pair of sneakers. But Chanel might put CC on the sneakers, but they're a pair of sneakers. And I just think that today's amazing 50s, 60s, and 70s, the amazing thing was music and fashion. Today's amazing is technology. To me, technology is unbelievable now. It's a science fiction area. To be able to have something as simple as that device, the
iPhone,
just like that, and that can give you any information you want in a second. The amount of information in that device that's in your pocket is staggering. So I think current timing, today's is about technology. It's not about fashion or that. Now, bringing it back to photography, I think there's always opportunity. It'll be interesting to see a young photographer that comes up and, basically could outshoot the generation from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, of some of the people that were there. And if you look at different genres of photography, even people like Cortez, Brassai, Rodchenko, and then you look at Avedon and Penn, and add to that list another 100, Cartier-Bresson, all of that. I mean, add traditional like Ansel Adams, whatever, you look at that. It was a fairly formidable bunch of people of what they could do. I find some interesting things around, some interesting photography around, and it might be generational. Just because someone did shots of his girlfriend with his iPhone, it looks a little bit lightweight to me, but who knows? That might be the future,
Just finally, I'm glad you mentioned Avedon and Penn, because your name is in this list. Considered one of the 20 most influential photographers of all time, along with Richard Avedon and Irving Penn. It reads well, doesn't it?
Well, it's a little bit grand. I mean, I wish, but because I think they were gigantically outstanding photographers.
Yeah.
But I think their timing when they were dropped on the planet was great.
Yeah.
In other words, 50s fashion, I mean, was kind of outrageous. 47, Dior, and so many designers that were producing outstanding, outrageous clothes.
But it's nice to be in that list.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's very nice. I mean, it's just a list. But I mean, if you'd shown me that in 1970, I might have fainted or something like that. But, the underlying force of whatever I achieved was driven by deep passion and obsession about photography. That was a driving force. Like when I got a camera in my hand, there were times I was working where it was so cold I couldn't feel fingers at all, but I didn't notice. Obsession and passion, these are all ingredients of the cake of who you are, the recipe of who you are,
And my thanks to Albert Watson for being the first of my special guests this week while I'm still away in Scotland at the end of the Photowalk retreat for 2026. We'll be announcing 2027 dates. They will be moving back into September, and we have two very different weeks. I say very different weeks. Subtly different to each other. There'll be photography involved in both. We're deciding which way around to do it, and there's something that's just making our mind up on that. But I do want to announce what we're doing. What way round it will be, watch this space. But we have a photographic week, which will involve photogravure. And I know after you've heard the special on polymer photogravure next week, you'll be thinking, I need to do that. Make my own print, the like of which I may probably only ever do once. But we're doing a photogravure, or we're doing photogravure within one of the weeks, the photographic week. We'll be visiting some new locations that we've not been to before with the Scottish Photo Retreat. It's a very photographic week, and of course the handcrafting with photogravure as well. And the other week, well, that's going to be the first of our writing weeks. Now, writing is a really important part of creativity for many people. But as you'll find when we have the Scottish Photowalk retreat show in a couple of weeks, it doesn't have to be something that's frightening. I know there's this sense of, I can't write, I'm not a poet, I can't write a novel. Or you can hear some fast jets in the background. Can you hear those? Faring through the glen, cue the song. But yeah, writing isn't something to be frightened of, and journaling is an important part of what we do as photographers, for many photographers, and we want to open up the opportunity to really work on that in a special writing and photographic week. We'll be going to places which certainly inspire writing and photography together, and we'll be working with at least two authors to really help you understand your writing and bring the joy of it to many photographers. It's been a real eye-opener this week because we, in our intimate group, we were really able to delve deep into what it means to be creative with our writing. So two different weeks coming up in 2027. The exact dates and the way round they are, we'll be probably releasing in the next 14 days, possibly less. Right, second guest for this special while I've been away. The next guest is Kieran Dodds. Now, I spoke to, again, a good few years ago, and I've seen his work exhibited in Inverness while I've been in the city. And I do so love his work, and I love his approach. And I love the way, again, generosity is a theme of my conversation with Kieran. He was born and raised in the Highlands. He spent years photographing people and communities around the world, often looking at stories of identity, place and belonging. Now, one of his best known projects fits right into that. It's called Gingers, and it's a long-term series that took him all across the globe photographing red-haired people in countries where you might least expect to find them. And what began as a simple idea grew into a fascinating exploration for him and the audience of ancestry and migration and all these strange connections that come from that. In this conversation, we'll talk about where the project began, what Kieran discovered along the way, and how a photographer from Scotland ended up following a trail of red hair around the world. This is part 2 of our special this week, and it's a conversation with Kieran Dodds.
A non-fiction photographer, Kieran, which is perhaps one of the more creatively expressive ways I've seen to describe photographic study. I'm going to ask you, though, what do you mean by it, of course?
Yes. Yeah. It is unusual. It's actually a Dutchman who suggested it in conversation, who's a guy who's edited my books, actually, Mark Proust. And when he said it, it really struck me as something which sounded slightly pretentious, maybe very to some ears.
No, I like it. I like it.
Well, I like it too, because obviously my background's photojournalism, and the word photojournalism even has taken a knock, because people not quite sure what it is. It's like, is it truth? You know, we're trying to attain truth, and then is it objective? And I feel like nonfiction is great for me because I still do editorial work, but I'm also finding space in galleries and exhibitions. And so nonfiction fits beautifully. And then doing the books as well. I mean, if you go in a bookshop, you know what nonfiction is.
Yeah.
It's like we just don't apply it to the photographic realm. So I feel like nonfiction, I was thankful for the Dutchman coming up with that.
Well, it was one of those moments. I mentioned it to my wife. I said, that's great, isn't it? That's inspired. I said, I'm not sure if I can talk to Kieran, because really I'd like to steal it.
Go for it. I stole it, so yeah.
No, I wouldn't. I couldn't now. I couldn't now after having spoken with you about it. But it's a good week to be talking, because we're celebrating 2 particular studies. Joel Meyeritz's new edition of Redheads, and your work called Gingers, which you travelled extensively to photograph. You're a man who boasts a strong head of ginger hair yourself. So,
slightly.
Well, more than me. So I imagine that connection is obviously important. But why the project? What was the reason behind it?
Yeah. So as you say, all my life I've been ginger. So it's been something which has been shouted at me, complimented to me over the years. But it took the Scottish independence referendum in 2014 to do anything professionally, photographically. And I was just brainstorming in 2013, the year before the referendum, about ideas on Scottish identity. And I came up with 5 projects in total, actually, a couple of video works and then stills. And the Gingers one was different because most of my work is environmental photography, either portraiture in the environment or landscapes. And so for me to do controlled light, studio-based work was very different and quite exciting for that. I wanted to challenge myself. So I thought it'd be an interesting idea. And 2 things happened just before the referendum. And one was when I was researching, I realized very quickly on, thanks to a very dubious map on the internet, that there was actually a global distribution. It wasn't just a Scottish trait. You know, it's a cliche of national identity that we're all like me, pale and ginger. But actually only 13%, like 1 in 8 people, show the hair type they think. So it's a very small number of people have it. And yet this map online showed the Celtic fringe, you know, Wales and Ireland and Scotland was red, but also Russia. And so that intrigued me from the start. And then I was reading about the discovery of the gene, which was discovered in Edinburgh, the MC1R gene, linked to red hair. And Professor Rees, who did the research, also did research on melanoma, so skin cancer, in Jamaica. And so from the start, I kind of thought, what's going on here? You know, there's like red hair in Jamaica, you know, darker skin pigment, but yet it's got this red hair trait. And so I thought this is a global trait. And then I went to the National Gallery of Scotland just for a sort of inspiration session to get inspired before I start these new projects. And in the early Renaissance room, up in a room, every single painting had a ginger person in it.
Yeah.
And it was right at the center of the painting usually. And these are famous paintings, you know, Botticelli's and Raphael's and Titian's. And I just thought, what's going on with this, you know? And that kind of inspired the aesthetic a bit, as well as portraits from the Enlightenment period as well by Rayburn and others. So there was a mashing up of things, and it kind of came together when I tried the portraits, and it seemed to work.
Because it's not really a project, as you say, about hair colour. That's the title, Colourfully. But this is a geographic observation of the gene and culture. I mean, let's take the town in Russia with the unexpected high number of people with this colour hair, where you went to photograph the suitably titled town of Perm.
Exactly. They didn't get it though. They don't get it.
No, it's probably
not
a chemical
in Russian.
Yeah, it's not called. It's nothing to do with hair in Russia.
It's called a chemical.
Yeah. But also Jamaica. That fascinated me.
Yeah, that's right. Treasure Beach. So that was the last one before lockdowns struck.
Yeah,
I'd wanted to go there for a while, and then I just thought, let's do it. People who know Treasure Beach will go back year after year, and it's like they recommend it to their friends.
Right.
It was just amazing to get there and to suddenly drive along the street in the sun and just see somebody with dazzling red hair.
Yeah.
They stand out.
Yeah.
So you'd go along the street and you'd be like, hold on, I know you. But also it's a small place. So the lady who's helping me, Rowena, she would contact friends and get them to come along. And
right.
It's a small community, so people knew about it.
So why ginger and not red? Because there is this sort of discomfort for those of us who aren't ginger that it may cause offence in that the term is used sometimes to bully or used in derogatory fashion. I'm not even sure it would have felt right if I'd have made the same study. Or am I being unnecessarily sensitive?
Yeah. Tim Minchin has the song "Only a Ginger Can Call Another Ginger Ginger."
Right.
And it is like that. But for me, it's not just about, so it is used as a derogatory term. And
yes.
So it's an opportunity for me to reframe that.
Yes.
And show people that actually it's this incredible golden splendor for people to see. But it was also because I think red's not good enough. And I'm not going to arm wrestle people over it, but it just, red is like blood and fire engines and post boxes for me. And there are different tones of it, but I feel like ginger allows us to go in that kind of spectrum, that from gold to deep brown, because ginger hair it's a mix, even from one head. It's this incredible mix, and so I kind of liked it for that. I thought it was good for that, and also it's a colloquial term. It's not always used insultingly, and most of the people I've spoken to and interviewed have actually, it becomes a kind of badge of honor.
Well, you're in the book with a self-portrait, and your own daughters are in the book as well, aren't they?
They are. They get the last word.
Yeah.
And it's dedicated to them. When I was making the work, obviously they didn't exist to begin with. And I would meet people, and often it was the kids, and you'd speak to them about their experiences of it, having the hair. And as you're younger, it's complimented by people walking by, and grannies love it. And as you get older, you get more awkward, and you don't like it so much. In fact, you might grow to hate it. And then it becomes part of you much more, and you embrace your identity. And I think the best stories for me were the ones of young kids who their parents would write afterwards and just said, such and such is walking a bit taller now. They realize they're part of a bigger story. They're connected to all these different people. Yeah. And so for me, I wanted to, in the book, I had my girls in mind because I thought I want them to see this when they grow up and be able to see that they're part of a bigger story. It's a global story. And that they are amazing because they will draw attention for it. So I suppose that was in the back and front of my mind at times.
Well, the book came out in 2020, sold out immediately, but I read that surprised you.
Well, yeah, self-publishing as a photographer is never a sort of done deal. Everybody just says, there's no money in books.
Yes.
And you'll just lose money. And so I was worried about that. But the reason I did The Gingers as my first book was because I thought of all my series, that is the one that probably has the greatest response. Whenever I share it online, people it just goes viral often. It's quite incredible. So I just thought I've got the best chance at it with this. I didn't expect to sell it. I did a limited edition, 1,000 books, limited edition, and then it was gone. So that was amazing. And I quickly turned around a second edition, a paperback version, sort of slightly trimmed back. And we turned that around for Christmas. Waterstones got some, and it was amazing,
Take me through your experience of self-publishing, because it's something that, as you say, photographers feel nervous of doing. Yet it's something that is such an important thing to do.
It is, yeah. And actually, at the start of 2020, so the pandemic was a trigger for it.
Yeah.
But at the start of 2020, I'd written down in my goals, book, and it was a Ginger's one I put down there. So I thought, for me, and as a photographer, I think it's a milestone in many ways.
Yeah.
You're kind of putting your work into the wider canon. It's a more solid legacy, because I've worked in editorial for almost 20 years. And so I've got stories out there, published in good publications. Yeah. They're in libraries somewhere, but actually a book is a different thing. Yeah. It enters a conversation. It gets your ideas into people's hands. And so I like that. I've been put off by the money because it is a big investment. But that, it started 2020, as I say, I kind of thought this is something I'm going to do. And then the pandemic struck, and all the money disappeared anyway. So I thought, this is an opportunity. Let's go through the process of editing, get some good people alongside me, and just see how this goes. And then before you know it, you've got a book. I thought it was interesting. Mark Proust, he helped with the thinking process, and I really rate Mark. He's curated my work before, and when it came to the book, he just helped me think through, what am I trying. We didn't look at any photographs. I was hoping he'd just go through all the pictures. We spent hours just chatting about what is the story, or even the book is not an end in itself. It's part of this bigger story. And that's what I feel with Gingers. It's like I'm always being dragged along by this story, by the coattails. I'm just holding on to it because I really feel that sense. It's got its own gravity. Yeah. And so the book is a marker of where we've got to in the project just now. And I hope in years to come I'll do more on it.
Your commissions you work on are wonderful stories of the unexpected. For example, I'll read the bio piece about it actually. Greenland has the shortest soccer season on Earth. A year's worth of matches, injuries, controversies, and celebrations crammed into less than a week. Yeah. Is that true, or was that slightly artistic license, or is it really?
It's true.
Really?
It's dead true. It's in the New York Times, the record of note. It's true. Yeah. And it's a mercifully short soccer season. That was one of the best assignments ever. It was, when was that? That was 2019.
Yeah, but just before pandemic, I think.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? When you could travel.
Yeah.
And Rory, I'd worked with Rory Smith a few times for the sports. He's a chief soccer correspondent. And we did one on Ilkay Gundogan in Man City. Mm-hmm. So we got to go down there and we spent a long-term project. I think I'm the only photographer to have jumped into the team pool because he was going in doing his physio and recovery. And I put my swimming shorts on. Intentionally, anyway, I jumped in. So I got a picture of that, and that was good. And the desk seemed to like that, and they published it. And so the Greenland one is that Rory had been talking about it, and it came off, and it was just phenomenal. You fly into this tiny village and spend a week there, just immersed, and all the teams are there, and you're popping in their houses, and it was classic kind of photojournalistic experience. It just had the best light, the best travel to get there. Everything was good. Even the cakes in the bakery were amazing. And everything for me was like, I'm done here. I don't know how I can beat this. Yeah. And then the pandemic hit. So I've not.
Now they have an injury problem as well, don't they? Because they don't actually play on grass.
Well, they've got Astro now. But even then it's brutal. So the guys are like all this pent up energy, and there's what is it, after a couple of days the hospital said don't come unless it's a broken limb. There's so many injuries, and it was just fantastic. But before that they hadn't had grass, so some of the pictures were still like rocks sticking out. The glaciers had retreated, and it's just this kind of plain of death.
You don't easily do a knee slide, or not exactly. not on the old pitch anyway. How do you come across these commissions? They're fantastic opportunities, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean the Greenland one, I've worked for the New York Times for years on and off, just like regular. So every few months, often in UK usually, and it'll be a news piece. But then a few years ago, I got connected with the sports desk, and that fitted with my longer term projects, because I switched years ago from commissions at the center of my business model to doing longer term projects, and then commissions came in off the back of that. And I found sports were great because they would give you like a 2-week lead time. They'd say, we've got the story, when can you fit it in? And they'd let you flex around it. And so just building that relationship really. But I think also being seen to be like a self-starter, like making your own projects, doing your own long-term project. I think editors appreciate that and think, if I commission him for this, it'll support his other work. But also they'll often commission you for work like your long-term projects. So I've done a lot of portraits like the Gingers. You know, they'll phone up and say, we're looking for like the Gingers, you know.
So I've heard the personal projects a lot. I talk to photographers, and a lot of the time they say the personal projects are so important because they really are your shop window. And you've just said it, you know, people will phone you up and say, I'd like that to be like the Gingers.
Yeah, and that's exactly. But I don't do it for a shop window. I do the stories because I feel like they are worth doing, and that is why I'm a photographer. I could make, I don't know, a living doing admin, and it would probably be as well and paid as sometimes. But you're doing it because you want to live as a photographer, making interesting stories.
Was the third pole one of your ideas that you said that wasn't necessarily commissioned? That was fantastic.
That wasn't commissioned at all. Yeah, that was. So third pole's like the Tibetan plateau.
I didn't. I never thought of it as three poles before. I've always just thought north-south, and when I read the piece, I thought, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's this huge sheet of ice in the Himalayas, but also it sort of encompasses an even larger catchment of the rivers.
Yeah.
So they're flowing off there, and it's billions of people depend on that. And again, that was just a story it was at a time when China was really in the center of people's attention as the rising power. I think 2007 I first went there. It was just so politically charged. I tried to come up with a story that was different and able to like get under the skin a little bit, especially with Tibet, because all you hear about Tibet is Tibet versus China, and you don't ever necessarily see the place and understand the people. And so I started doing this story on yak and how the yak are the kind of the keystone of all survival. Their dung brought fire and allowed people to survive. And then the third pole became a proper project when I applied for a Winston Churchill Travel Fellowship. So again, it's just like you're pitching an idea and then going to this panel and getting grilled over it. And that links back to my degree was in zoology. My interests are in environmental conservation and our place in the world as human beings. And so it kind of fits with that.
Is arts and photography well funded for projects like that? Bizarrely, I don't know why I say bizarrely, but Denmark, I've spoken to a reasonable amount of photographers from Denmark, and Denmark are particularly good at supporting the photographic industry, it seems. I don't know whether it's better than the UK or not, but it seems to me that it might be.
Yeah, definitely. I think Scandi countries are. Sweden as well, a few friends there they're just given a big state salary to be doing what they're doing. I think it is. It's not easier because they're top of their game. You have to really work at it. But there's a lot of photographers and artists here who could probably benefit from that.
So searching for the funding.
So searching for the funding, I mean,
that's a project in itself, probably searching for the funding.
It is, and it would be good to spend more time on the creation of it than actual trying to find the funding.
Yes.
And so it's varied. Like the third pole was great because that was a Winston Churchill Travel Fellowship, which are designed for British citizens to develop their careers, and actually they're very generous, the funding for that. So that was a very good one. It doesn't pay your salary, but it pays for the trip, and then you've got to then sell to magazines or do exhibitions afterwards. And I think that's why the bookmaking for me has been a good thing, actually, because making the Gingers book made me realize there's a market out there. There's people who are interested in collecting this work. Yeah. So that helped me I've just produced another little book of Gingers, which is more aimed at a bigger market, people who still appreciate photography, but can't necessarily stretch to a bigger photo book.
I've had a good few conversations about how photography is a great enabler. It's these moments, like when you're traveling, like when you're in Tibet and Greenland, that these projects or commissions that serve to remind us of that, isn't it? It is a great enabler, photography, isn't it? Can you imagine anything giving that opportunity quite like that you've received?
I don't think so. I mean, you could have all the money in the world and you could go around these places, but it's so different when you're there with a purpose and to be able to, the excuse to be in people's lives, like in a Tibetan tent, and just to be having tea with people, and you're explaining what you're doing, and they're welcoming you in for the purpose of showing the world their lives. You know, they're happy. It's quite a thing, actually. Or even in the Gingers, like Jack McNaughton is one picture of a wee lad. He's in his wheelchair, and in the portrait, looking quite stern. He's got a very strong face because he's been through a lot in his life. And just to be there with his mum and him discussing what they've been through and the emotion, it was just so powerful, you know? And I'm a Scotsman, so it takes a lot for me to feel emotional. But that interview, I had to stop it, because I could barely speak. So it's those moments, it really does feel like special. And everything else you do is not so I can be at my desk typing in a spreadsheet. It's so I can actually just be picking up the cameras in the car or on the ground in Ethiopia with my drone ready, just like being there at dawn and just being in the place. That's what you live for.
Your work is about global events and portraiture and obviously a wider understanding of people. It's a very challenging time in the world right now. And on the RPS, I read some words which are relevant to global expression. I'm going to quote again, if you don't mind. I visited Russia in 2017 and was struck by how great the country was and also how much prejudice I unfairly held against it. The bad guys in the films are Russian and every headline has them hacking, poisoning, interfering, but the vast majority just want to live peaceful lives in their communities. I would imagine right now, Kieran, that visit is probably playing on your mind because you've been immersed in a culture that most of us will never understand because we've never been within it or with the people within it. We're only seeing what's on the news right now.
Yeah, it feels sadly more true today because the hatred towards the country is even greater. But again, I hope in some small way my work can help to show that people are people wherever they are. And in Russia, again, it's to show beyond the political label that a homogenous group of people is not homogenous. There's diversity within that, to the point that friends who helped me on the project are now fleeing the country. And I'm sure maybe some of the people in the portraits. So yeah, it's disturbing. And I feel like maybe it feels trite in a way to have ginger portraits as some way to respond to that. But that for me is I've barely said anything online about Russia and Ukraine. I don't really feel I've got much to add. But at least I can show that there is a common humanity, which some in control have lost. And yeah.
What's the next project?
Well, there's a couple. I mean, we're doing a bit of a loft extension, so I need to get that for my girls.
I wasn't really thinking about the DIY project.
That's right. I need a bit more space upstairs. There's one I'd love to do, which I applied, and I don't think I've got it. And I'll keep chipping away. I started a project last year on rewilding in Scotland. It's the perception of the wilderness and how we understand what is a man-made landscape.
Yes.
And I've been keen for a while to do a series on the lowland clearances. So people know the Highland clearances in Scotland, but before it and predating it and triggering it is a far larger movement of people, mass migration, just from the field into the cities, called the lowland clearances. And it kind of links to my own family history. So I've been sort of looking into that and looking at how landscape gives rise to culture. So I've got a proposal out there. So I really want to work on that and have a bit of time to chip away on that. And it involves sort of printing on fabric as well. So I quite like time to experiment and try something. I often have these projects that don't, like there was one part of this project, I ended up spray painting about 250 sheep.
What?
With a message on them in the Highlands. But you'll not see that for a few years. But it was trying to convince the farmer to do this was great. There's something in the background there, and it's a slow burner. Oh, okay. And it might come to nothing, but I think it's got legs, 4 legs. Really, yeah. There's a sneak preview. Anyone out there want to fund that, please get in touch.
And my sincere thanks to Kieran Dodds for being the second guest on this shorter show this week of the Photowalk while I'm still away in Inverness, but not for too much longer. I'm looking across an orchard. We stay at a wonderful fruit farm, a working fruit farm, and I'm looking across the orchard part of that farm at the moment. The skies are delicious. Look at those foreboding grey skies above me, and perhaps a dab of rain on the way. We've got some super photographs to share from this special, which will be shared over the next couple of weeks. But that's it for this week. Join us for the start of those 2 Scottish specials from next week.
What's there to hold in the light of this moon? My mind keeps searching, but my heart decides. Thoughts can be cruel, they're not mine to hold. The space unravels when you let go.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.